Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Tina, and today I want to talk with you about habits that I saw regularly in my middle class upbringing that were keeping me from growing my wealth. These are 9 items that I had to personally overcome in order to grow my net worth and to really understand how money works. I'm sharing them with you today as a shortcut. It took me many years, over a decade, to learn all of these lessons, and I hope they're really helpful to you. So let's kick it off. Number 1 is focusing on making more money rather than growing your wealth. I believe it's completely true that you are able to become really wealthy even with smaller incomes. And yet for many of us that grew up living a blue collar lifestyle because our parents were blue collar workers or even entry level first generation white collar workers, we did not see people who really understood the fundamentals of growing wealth. And so anytime that they wanted to have more money, it became about making more money. What can I do to up level my skills? What can I do? Can I go to school? Can I invest in myself? Like, how do I go about doing that? That is really valuable information, but what would happen regularly is that making more money became about paying off the larger debt that was accrued, or it just got soaked up in an inflated lifestyle. So every time my parents would make more money, they ultimately would end up spending more money. It should be more about managing the money you have well, and then as that money is well managed, if you make more money, you will just manage that money well. So growing wealth because of making more money can only happen if you manage what you currently have really well. Item number 2 is funding your lifestyle with debt. So part of the reason that in my upbringing there was a push to make more money was because there was more debt to pay off. You know, as that lifestyle creep happened, there would be trips or there would be purchases that were put on credit cards. And then there was a desire to make more money in order to be able to handle all of the credit card payments. I recently spoke with, maybe not recently, about a year ago, I spoke with somebody who lives in our neighborhood, and they were telling me that, you know, they were excited because they were about to pay off their Disney vacation from 2 years ago. I believe it is true when Dave Ramsey says that the new status symbol is the paid off house. But think about that in broader terms, about just ensuring that everything that you have in your life, whether they're luxurious or commonplace items, that they're paid for with cash or that they're paid outright and owned outright when you enjoy them, when you experience them, when you purchase them. Item number 3 is a big one for me. This was actually a paradigm shifting item, and it goes hand in hand with paying for lifestyle items with your credit card. I didn't necessarily pay for lifestyle items with my credit card. I was very keen to understand that credit card use should be reserved for special circumstances, but I defined those special circumstances as emergencies. So for me personally, whenever I was using my credit card, it was because an emergency had come up. It might be that my car needed new tires, or it needed to go into the shop, or something happened with the house and we needed to get something repaired. Every time that we were using the credit card, it was such a strain because a lot of these items or these transactions were bigger ticket items because they were, you know, emergency fund type transactions. It was a paradigm shift for me when I finally understood that credit cards were not designed for emergencies. And there are many people that will use them that way, and they have to right now because of their current financial situation. I work with many of my clients about understanding, you know, what is the difference between a sinking fund savings account and emergency savings account. I have videos on both of those, which I will link in the description box for you. But just coming to the realization that credit cards, I do believe that they have a place and a purpose in your financial toolbox. However, it is not your emergency fund unless you're in a really, really tight pickle. Item number 4 is confusing liabilities for investments. And I have been such a culprit of this. The biggest one that people always talk about is that your primary residence is not an investment, it is your primary residence, and you have to pay money regularly to maintain it. However, I do think there's some misunderstanding there. Your primary residence could be an investment if you were willing to sell it in order to get the money out of it. So for example, when my husband and I relocated to Missouri from Colorado, our primary residence was an investment to us. We had purchased it in the trench of the market in 2013 and we sold it in 2018. We had a pretty significant come up on that, and that come up, the money we took out of the house, then was able to not only pay off our house outright in Missouri, but also it was able to be a massive down payment for our first investment property. Therefore, it really was like an investment to us. But it really is only the case if you're willing to sell that property, if you're willing to take the money out of it, or if it can cash flow for you. I have also seen this with people who are buying higher end vehicles. They're like, well, if I could also, pay it off in 5 years and then it still has $20,000 worth of value or $15,000 worth of value in it, it's like an investment. No, investments grow in value. Investments produce cash for you. If it's not producing cash for you and it's not growing in value, it's not an investment, no matter what you say. Item number 5 is one that is very dear to my heart. So I am a firm believer in the concept of prospection, which is where you will envision the future that you want and you will steadily work toward it. When I was young, I was doing it without even realizing. I would have these fantasies and these daydreams when I was a child about the kind of person I wanted to be and the kind of work that I wanted to do. And part of that meant going to college, even though I was the first person in my family to do so. I really believe that part of the reason I was able to do that is because I held on to these daydreams from when I was young. That being said, something happens when we get to like our early adulthood and we're quote unquote adulting, really. I think a lot of people forget to daydream. They forget to just dream about the future. And then we fall into a default future. This idea of having a default future looks a lot like if I come up to you and I'm like, what do you think your life will be like in 5 years? Many people might say, I don't know. I mean, it'll probably be pretty close to the same. Maybe I'm making like $50,000 more a year and I drive a nicer car and have a bigger house. Listen, if that's exactly what you want for the future, that is wonderful. However, so many people want much more than that. So many people want the freedom to no longer be in the rat race. So many people want adventure. They want, to explore. They want to create. They want to produce. They want to do these really meaningful things in their lives. And they don't do anything to get themselves there. And part of the reason for that is because they don't spend any time really dreaming about it in a way where they believe it could be true. So one of the things that I really encourage all of my clients to do, it's one of the core tenets of the coaching practice that I have, is that you have a clear vision. And it doesn't even have to be that clear, to be honest. It could be vague. You could have a vague vision, vivid vision, vague vision, as long as you have a vision for the future that you can steadily work toward. What are things you could do now that would help produce that? And we just focus one quarter at a time. What are things you could do in the next 90 days that could help you get closer to that person, that lifestyle, that career that you really want? This idea of designing the future you want is so powerful and so important, and so many people lose sight of it. Item number 6 brings me back to the former Dave Ramsey personality, Chris Hogan. He made the claim that retirement isn't an age, it's a number. And I learned that lesson prior to reading Chris Hogan's book, although he really solidified it for me. The way that I had learned about it was finding a blog called Mr. Money Mustache. Mr. Money Mustache is a guy that used to have this very active blog. I don't know that it's still active, and it might not even be out there anymore, but you can still find some information about him, like for sure. He was 30 years old when he and his wife retired, and what they did is they essentially figured out like, hey, if we have this minimalist lifestyle and we work really hard through our 20s in the tech industry, which is where I think they were, then if we hit, X number dollar amount, that is our financial independence number. At that dollar amount, we no longer have to work because the dividends coming off of that dollar amount will be sufficient to sustain the lifestyle that we have today. When he said that, I just was having a mind blown moment, right? Because at that time, I found him when I was 35 and he had already been retired for several years. And what blew my mind about it is that the number that they were living off of was $30,000 a year. And now, mind you, this was back in 2015, maybe even earlier for him actually retiring. It might have been 2012. But they had crafted a lifestyle where they lived in a small bungalow. They shared one car. They rode their bikes a lot. They, raised a garden, and they had a few other small cash flow enterprises that they were working on, like the blog. But for the most part, they lived off of the $30,000 in dividends that their investments generated for them. And recognizing that that was possible shifted completely the way that I think about money. I offer a financial independence exercise for my clients where I'm like essentially saying, hey, let's do the math. Let's find out what it costs for you to live annually. Let's inflate that number a little bit for taxes. And then we can get a ballpark on what it would take for you to be able to retire indefinitely, retire early, if you will. Now, you guys know, I do not believe in financial independence for retire early. I believe in financial independence for recreational employment. I'm the kind of person that wants to find work that I love, that's meaningful, and then work until I die, because I think, honestly, that people were designed to work and that it is, the most fulfilling thing that we can do. I believe that people are happiest, truly happiest, when they are working towards something that is a larger goal that they make steady progress toward. So this idea of financial independence for recreational employment goes hand in hand with this idea of, retire early is a number and not an age, because I want you to be able to have that career shift. I want you to be able to find that new enterprise, that new business that you want to build. But in order to do that, many people, they have to be able to cover the lifestyle that they already have. So we still do this exercise of figuring out, what's it cost to live your life? How can we save up money or build up your investments to cover that? And then you can go and pursue that more meaningful course of action in your life. But remember, this idea that you'll just get to retire at 65, it's not true. And that leads me to item number 7. Many middle-class people considered money a taboo topic. So part of the reason why so many of the people in the late boomers and the Gen Xers, the reason they didn't know about how to prepare for retirement is because people weren't talking about it. And unfortunately, I think in the middle class, there's still a lot of this idea that you don't talk about politics, you don't talk about religion, and you don't talk about money. I laugh at myself now, because while I still stay away from politics, I very much so talk about religion and money. And I talk about them a lot. I'll mention them on this channel. When I was still working my corporate job, I would travel, and I would travel with senior executives. I would go to conferences, and I would engage with people who were tech startup owners or senior tech executives. And these are people who made a lot of money. And it struck me and it surprised me how willing these people were to speak about what they had going on, what they were pursuing, how they were making their money grow. And that could be anything from investments that they were looking at to how they were structuring their rental properties. I recently did a video about how we paid for our second investment property, how we acquired our second investment property using a line of credit from our first. That idea came to me from an executive that I used to work for. We were traveling, we were driving to Napa, and she mentioned how they were using a HELOC on their home to acquire an investment property. Then they would refinance that investment property into its own commercial mortgage. And then once it was paying for itself, that would free up the HELOC and they would start looking for the next investment property. And I think they had a portfolio of, probably somewhere between 5 and 10 properties from using this exact process, which is what we've replicated now, my husband and I, with our second investment property. Speaking about money really opens up people to understand and think bigger, and it really enables that dreaming for the future. If she had never had that conversation with me, how likely would I have been to believe the possibility of us having multiple rental properties? We'd talked about it for years, but hearing her say that really helped me understand just how possible it is. One of the things that has always been a difficulty for me when I was living paycheck to paycheck was the idea that it's cheap, I can afford it. If it's cheap and I can afford it, then it seemed like a no-brainer that I should just pursue it. This rationale I have completely flipped over in my own life. And the reason for that is because many of the things that I have purchased, because they were on sale or because they were cheap or because they seemed really affordable, ended up being low quality and getting ruined and getting broken and needing to be replaced. What helped me understand how to flip this over was recognizing the boots dilemma. I've mentioned the boots dilemma in previous videos, and this is the idea that, let's say you're a miner who does really hard, heavy workload, and you're constantly on your feet and you're requiring very durable footwear. Back in the day, let's say $50 boots were considered extremely expensive and not very many people could afford to buy them. So what would happen, instead of getting these really durable, high quality boots, is you would have people that buy the $7 boots, but they would have to be replaced every 6 months. So every 6 months, this person is buying another pair of $7 boots. It doesn't take very long, just a few years, to then have spent the $50 that you could have invested in the first pair of boots. A Reddit that I found recently is called Buy It for Life, and I love it. I am out there all the time. A personal example of where I made this exact mistake, the boots mistake, let's say, is my bedroom furniture. When I was in my 30s and we were still living in Colorado, I purchased an entire bedroom set. It included the bed frame, headboard, everything, a dresser, a chest of drawers, and 2 night tables. So it was 5 pieces of furniture, and I paid about $3,300 for that. At that time, I had a friend who purchased a sleigh bed, and the sleigh bed was alone like $3,300. And I remember thinking, wow, for the price that they paid for that, look at everything that I got. The problem is that now my furniture 10, 11 years later is completely falling apart. Like the bed's in trouble, the night tables are in trouble. It's really, they're crap. They're completely, they look terrible. It's an embarrassment. I can't stand it. The person who bought that solid wood sleigh bed, I went to their house not long ago, and honestly, it looks brand new still. It's amazing. The fact that they bought this high quality bed, they invested in it very heavily when they first bought it, but they will have it for the rest of their lives. And they bought it in such a nice, elegant style that it will be something that their children can use or sell, heaven forbid, when they're passed away. I just want to add that the place where I see a lot of this happen is in the idea of, oh, I can get Starbucks every day. I can go out to lunch every day. I can get multiple streaming apps. I can push the button to buy a little bit more time on this game that I'm playing on my phone. And the reason we do that is because you're looking at transactions that are anywhere from $3 to, I don't know, let's say $15. Well, $3 isn't that much money, and $15 isn't that much money either. But when you stack those on top of each other over and over and over again, you could be blown away by how much money you've actually spent. One of the services that I offer is doing a multi-month analysis of my clients' spending, because a lot of times they just have no clue. No, they've never looked, and frankly, sometimes they're terrified to look. And I remember an eye-opening moment that I had with a client where I knew he regularly played an online game, and I had asked him, what is the budget that you like to keep to for this online game? And he's like, no more than $100 a month. We went through and I was able to show him how he had spent over $300 a month on this game 2 of the 3 months that I looked at. He was floored. Never in his wildest dream did he think that he had spent that much money on it. So I just want to remind people that this idea of it's cheap, I can afford it, can be really problematic, and it can cause you to overspend in ways, especially when you're not doing that sort of review or that evaluation of your spending. I want to employ this philosophy of buy less, buy better in everything that I do and the stuff that I purchase now. So I'm kind of mixing 2 things here, and I'm kind of slipping into my final item, which is to buy less, buy better, focus on quality and focus on functionality over purchasing things because they are affordable. There you have it, guys. That is my list of 9 middle-class habits and ways of thinking that will keep you from growing your wealth. I really appreciate you guys watching this video. Thank you so much for your time. If you've made it to this point, please give me a like, a share, a comment, and definitely subscribe because it will help my channel grow. I appreciate you. I will see you in the next one.